Hello, everybody, and welcome to the fifth virtual gathering of Conversant and Friends now. Today, we're going to be having a conversation about purpose. It's part of the continuing series that we do here at Conversant to explore issues and topics that we think leaders are particularly interested in that we think we might have something to say about. And today, we are joined by Michael Reuter. Michael is a longstanding client and friend. He's got a lot of experience in authentic conversations and challenging systems issues. He's currently the Midwest Region Director for the Nature Conservancy. Michael, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you. And we also have Anne Murray Allen. Anne Murray Allen is a senior consultant who's been in a number of foxholes with Michael and a number of other folks. Welcome, Anne.
Yes, thank you.
And Emma Rose Connolly is also joining us. She's going to be running the webinar, and she's also going to be monitoring the chat for us. So Emma Rose, do you want to give a couple of words about how the chat's going to work?
Sure. Yeah, so I will just be here to make sure that everybody's voice gets in if it needs to. So we do want to say we've learned from doing these a couple of times over the past few weeks that some people really enjoy the aspects of chat and getting to participate and get their voice in, and other people find it distracting. So we invite you to choose whatever is best for your experience of being with us today. And do know that if you do put something in the chat, it is my responsibility to make sure that it gets brought up and our lovely panelists have the opportunity to chime in on your thoughts and your questions. So
good. I love the lovely part. We'll own that for a moment.
Don't get too big of a head yet. All right.
I have Anne and Michael to keep me square. I don't have to worry too much. So today's topic is really to talk about purpose. And the way we're going to define it is it's the mutual resolve of a community. It's what we're all for. It's what gives us guidance to know what we're going to say yes and no to. And the distinction between purpose and a goal, for example, is a purpose answers the question, we have a goal for the sake of what? Why is this important to us? It's important because it serves a purpose. It's not just independent and by itself. So we're going to explore this a little bit more deeply. And what I wanted to do was start with you, Michael. You've been the key person in a lot of very challenging conversations, very challenging projects with multiple stakeholders where the tensions were high and purposes might be hard to come by. So we immediately thought of, we ought to get Michael to talk about purpose because that's something that we know you've been steering off of in these challenging times. But for you, what had you say yes to this conversation? Why do you think it's important for us to talk a little bit more and explore this idea of purpose?
Well, I always enjoy hanging out with you all. I've learned a lot, and this felt like a learning opportunity, and was really honored to be asked because purpose is a really important topic to me. It's as someone who works for a nonprofit organization that's trying to work with complex collective groups of people, a lot of times trying to move action forward. Purpose is really the fuel kind of in our tank, to make that happen. And so as we try and figure out a way to have positive change in the world, and knowing that there's a lot of change happening in the world, it's more and more uncertain and more complex. So we have to adjust. We have to adapt to a lot of things that are happening. What purpose is to me and to us is what keeps us grounded, and it keeps us focused on what we're trying to get accomplished. And it gives us an ability to revisit goals, as you mentioned, and what we're aspiring to do, but it grounds us in what we actually care about at the end of the day, like what brings us together, what makes us excited about what we're trying to get done. And so then at a personal level, it feels like, for me, purpose is what, being aligned and being connected to my purpose at an individual level is what really helps me show up as a contributor in those conversations and in the organization. So at multiple levels, it just feels really purpose to me, and purpose feels really important to me, and I just was pleased to join you.
Well, in my experience of working with you, Michael, you bring a very strong personal purpose to the work that you do. You're not indifferent to whether you make a difference. And it seems you're consistent in how you make that work in each regard. So I love the fact that you talked about purpose at multiple levels. It's not just an organizational purpose or a project purpose. It's also individual purposes. And I know, Ann, that's been important to you before. Can you say, for you, why is purpose something that you think smart leaders pay attention to?
Well, as human beings, we are meaning-making creatures. We're very social in our nature, and we also create stories and purposes about why we belong where we belong, or why something's important to pursue. And it doesn't mean that we naturally are always on purpose, however. I mean, we can, if we're not very clear in our thinking, if we don't ask ourselves the right question, like for what purpose, or why would this be important, we can lose our way or kind of drift. But it's such a powerful way, purpose is such a powerful way to find meaning in daily living and in our work. And in the quality of our relationships. So, and meaning is a rewarding thing for human beings. It feels good. We feel like now we can make a contribution to what matters most. So that's why I think purpose is just fundamental to our living our lives, as well as to joining others in any endeavor.
So let me poke at that a little bit, because you used the word meaning a couple of different times. For some people, that can feel soft. Like, no, we got things to get done. You know, all this meeting thing, I'm really happy for you, and, you know, good for you, yay. But we got stuff we got to get done. How do you help people make that connection between why is meaning important at the personal and in the collective level with, we got to get something done at the end? This is, you know, we got to produce a result.
Yeah, well, I would say that if I haven't found or discovered what I find meaningful about my work, or why I do what I do, it's going to feel, at least for me personally, I can say this, I feel kind of dull, like I'm floating, like I'm following somebody else's idea. It's like, who's in my day-to-day existence now? That sounds like a good idea. I'll do that. The other trap I think we fall into is we're always talking about what we don't want. I don't know what I want, but I don't want that, and I don't want this. If I really know what I'm on purpose for, what matters to me, what has meaning for me, I can talk from a place of what am I for versus what I'm against, which is far less powerful in terms of being able to accomplish anything.
And Michael, you've been involved in more than a few multi-stakeholder engagements where their purposes didn't nest nicely. For you, what did you keep your eye on that helped people find some kind of common ground to move forward? Because a lot of times it can feel like you're squeezing a balloon. If we allow you to do this, it damages me in this way, and vice versa. How do you approach that?
Well, I love what Ann said about meaning and you know, the question of what am I for? And I'd like to combine that in my own mind with the other question that she asks a lot is, what is it time for now? And putting the two of those get really important. So for example, you know, in our work these days, you know, climate is an overarching issue that defines everything. And a lot of us feel like this is the decade, right? It's the decade in which we know enough about what is happening that we know what we need to do, but we also still have time to make some decisions to do something about it. So that getting that sense of our place, you know, what are we for at this place in time is, I think, really an important couple of questions to keep bringing back to the group, you know, just reflecting on what do we find that we hold together and value together. So we work with groups, for example, around a lot of water issues on the Mississippi River. And it turns out that people that run their barges up and down the river and ship products and bring goods and services to all of us actually care about some of the same connectivity issues up and downstream that the ecologists care about and the hydrologists who talk about flooding care about. So being mindful of, what are we for individually, what are we for collectively, and then bringing back to that, and then putting that in the context, I think, of the moment in time that we are in, the opportunity that we have to take some action together, to achieve some things together that we can't, especially those things that we can't do alone, is just really important. So I keep wanting to come back to that, and I need to come back to that myself, because that meaning that Ann talked about is what brings energy into the conversation and into the work, right? So we've all been going through the motions before, but when we find meaning in it and when we're on purpose, the energy level, I think, comes up.
The other thing, just to build on that, because we reference this session as let purpose be the boss. And, certainly, Michael, you and I have been in a few of those complex initiatives with multiple stakeholders. There's a lot of argument about how to move forward, and who's being heard or not heard. And what we often will do is say, okay, what's our purpose? Hold off for a minute before we start arguing about what at Conversant we often call methods or processes, or, what are we going to do next? And we come back to what is this thing that we all aligned on in the first place? It was our collective purpose.
Right.
And so with that as the guide, let's come back to what's it time for now, or what's important right now to move forward on. We can get lost when we just talk about methods, and we forget our purpose. And a final thought on that, because we did talk about empathy before as well. If we really want to have a powerful purpose together, that does start with empathy. Do I really understand each of these stakeholders' points of view? The commercial guys with barges on the river, the recreational people, the city managers who care about the water supply, the naturalists, etc. Have we really spent time understanding the other's point of view? And in that, we form a collective purpose that can emerge. It's an intersection. And then let that be our guide.
Yeah. I'm reminded as you're talking, one of the classic stories about where purpose made a huge difference is in 2010, the Chilean miners, the 33 miners that were trapped underground. The person that was in charge of managing that whole effort, the story goes that he started every meeting with a reminder that our purpose here is to bring them out alive. That's going to drive our conversation. And you think, well, of course we know that. No, he needed to remind people, because especially in that with so much stress, so much tension, family members, the pressure, the press, the world watching, it's easy to get blown off course. And for him, he wanted to remind everybody, okay, wait a minute, this is our North Star. This is guiding everything we do. This trumps everything. So whatever you have to say as an idea, if it moves us towards this purpose, let's talk. If it doesn't, maybe we're not going to spend so much time on that.
Yeah.
Which is a good segue to ask the question, so why is it important now? Why particularly do we think smart leaders are paying more and more attention to having purpose be the boss?
Well, one thing I'll say about that is we face a lot of intractable problems on the planet today. We keep running at them and don't quite, have the impact that we might want to see in a society that at times feels unjust or, unequal in terms of how citizens are treated around the world. And some of the climate change issues, Michael, that you brought up, why aren't we gaining more on that? And in order to really attack an intractable problem anymore, it doesn't take one organization or person. It's really about people coming together with a unified purpose. You have to work for that. You don't just announce a unified purpose and everyone jumps on board. I mean, sometimes that happens, but you have to really find it together, and then you believe it together, and that becomes the guide to some pretty extraordinary work.
I love it.
Yeah, I do too. And at this particular moment in time, I think we're recognizing, I like the idea that we just can't, I think the problems we're trying to solve or the challenges we're trying to address, I think a lot of organizations are just realizing that they need to collaborate to do that, which means you have to start, and to understand those, we have to start to respect and as you talk about empathy, to really bring in different viewpoints and perspectives and hold those together to sort of find our way through that. And I think, particularly at this moment, with COVID-19 and all of that is going on, it brings a kind of adversity into the mix, a disruption, into our normal day-to-day patterns that leaves us looking for, some solid ground. And that is our purpose, right? That is the solid ground that we sort of crave. And so how do we get present to that again? And it's even, I think, forcing us to be, even more essential about that. I sort of think of it as like, holding up precious little items and thinking about the canoe trip you're going to take and how much you can carry and paddle. But then, what we're dealing with right now is sort of like a long portage. So you start to think about even more essential in terms of what are we really for, and what are we trying to do together. And I think that the adversity that we're feeling, the challenges that are kind of overwhelming us now as individuals in society are really potentially strengthening, or certainly creating the opportunity to strengthen our individual purpose and our collective purpose together through, the kind of authentic communication that you all talk about.
Yeah, because I think there's something happening in this time with the COVID, especially, that is exacerbating an existing move, I think, in our society culturally towards a hyper focus on what we don't want, what we're complaints about, what we think ought to be different, how we wish they, them, those would be more like us. And if you add this fear of the COVID-19 around it and all the financial challenges associated with it, the dislocation socially, there's a tendency for it to pull us apart into our small little clods, wishing that the world were different than it was. I think the antidote to that largely is purpose. What are we for as an organization, as a project team, as individuals? What can we stand on? I love what you said, Michael, about firm ground. Where can we stand to deal with all this swirl? What do we care about that will withstand most, if not all, changes in circumstances? I think people are desperate to have something. And you talked about what are we for? What do we value together? I think people are desperate for someone to give us some hope, realistic hope, in the direction of what we really care about. And all of this diminution via fear and oppression, I think, is wearing on people. People are desperate for some leaders to step forward and say, what do we care about? Where do we stand? What do we know? What can we do?
Yeah, we're about to be bombarded, I guess, by a multi-million-dollar campaign telling us to just get back to normal and return to normal. And I think more and more of the conversation is, well, do we really want to go back to normal? Haven't we learned something? And what if we started to imagine something different together? What if we created a new story? What is the story we want our kids to tell our grandkids in 2060 about this time, and what we learned and what we put back together? And so it's making, I think we have to find a way to make those choices together, and I think that's our opportunity. And I think you're right. People are, I hear certainly a lot of us kind of craving to mold that together. What we've seen is less integrated and coherent than we think we want it and need it to be in our society. So how do we reassemble that together and make better choices going forward? It's a tremendous opportunity in terms of purpose and shared purpose and collective action, I think.
There's actually a question in the chat that is related to all this about what about when our purpose needs to change or adapt? And how do you go about that? And how do you redefine a purpose for a collective? Or even as an individual, but sometime like right now.
Anne, what would you say? I know that
Well,
this
that's,
is something near and dear to your heart.
well, actually, this is a very hard question for me to answer because so much of the purpose that I feel in my own life or in working with others feels pretty unchanging at the level of, Michael, some of the initiatives we've been a part of were like really higher order purposes, restore fisheries in the Great Lakes to native stocks, and to do it in a way that engages all the people that would depend on it for livelihood or whatever. I mean, does that change? Well, my methods might change based on the day-to-day, there's suddenly a constraint here, a new political administration takes over, the funding that we might access to do certain work isn't there. We have to create a new path forward. But maybe you guys have an example, but purpose may become sharper, like I know for myself with this whole COVID kind of time out, stay at home, I have had an opportunity to sharpen my own personal purpose as I reflect more. I go, well, now I'm getting real clear on some things, Michael, to your point, I don't want to go back to when this is over. I want to create something different. So, but it's not like I have a whole new purpose or anything like that. So I don't know what the rest of you think.
Well, one thing that comes up to me is, and just to build on what you're saying, I think, I too think purpose is, we an essential purpose, we tend to stick with that a while, right? Because that's sort of core value, kind of grounded stuff. But I do think at moments in time like we're in, we have to find a way through this together. So we have to find a way to blend purpose and find collective purpose. And I think one way to sort of create opportunities for us to challenge our purpose is to sort of collide with people who we don't know, and bring others into the room to increase the diversity and that kind of interaction. We actually have been playing with this a little bit in our organization earlier. The tendency right now is to hunker down, look at budgets, figure out ways to reduce costs. How do we get through this? Tighten it up. And that tends to be a small group of people that feel like they're ready to have that conversation. It's tricky, people's careers and things are at stake. But today we organized a call across the Midwest. We had 250 staff on Zoom, and we just started to ask some questions. We wanted to check in with how they're feeling, and we put them in random groups, people that didn't know each other, 3 to 4 people in each. And we said, what are your ideas to move through this, and who do we want to become as an organization on the other side of this? Questions like that. And we asked people to, if they got into interesting conversations, to hang in there, right? And stay in that outside. It was just a 1-hour call, is to start, not to finish. And then we're kind of sweeping those ideas into our executive committee to sort of work through them. So we haven't had a chance to go through all that yet, but I think by meeting people we don't know and learn and opening ourselves to that kind of discovery does allow us to kind of shift our own purpose, perhaps slightly, but also to really shape kind of a collective way forward.
Maybe it expands.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking is, in these times when things are thrown, there's upheaval, that swirl we keep talking about, that it allows organizations and individuals to get clearer about what their purposes are. It helps refine that in that conversation that you're talking about. Sometimes because, we want to come together and this is a great opportunity. And sometimes it's because our livelihoods are threatened. The quote is something about nothing focuses the mind quite so much as staring down the barrel of a gun. Just that intense time that we're in gives us a chance to really refine and sharpen that. And then, as you were saying, Ann, maybe it's the methods that change. And a lot of times we confuse methods with purposes, that our method all of a sudden is our purpose, our raison d'etre. No, well, maybe not. Maybe we forgot what our largest purpose is. And this helps us repurpose ourselves around methods. So
Yeah.
as you think about it, then for leaders that are committed to being the iconic stories that people tell later, because I believe this is going to be an opportunity for real leaders to step forward and create stories that exist long after they're gone, and the stories will still be remembered. What actions do you think leaders should be taking now to revivify or take advantage of the power of purpose?
Well, for me, it's simple, but I have to remind myself all the time. It's just to lead with purpose out loud. You know, sometimes we're walking around with our purpose. We know what it is, but we don't really, share it proactively. You know, somebody's got to ask us or get into another conversation. And so to be able to meet people, even on sitting next to them somewhere, and I guess no one's sitting next to anyone right now, but meeting people on Zoom and just saying, here's what I deeply care about. This is what's really driving me. Or I'm part of a group. I mean, most recently with a group of other women, we started a global effort called the Magnolia Moonshot 2030. And it was meant, in this time of climate change, how do we expand and broaden women's leadership? And, we say to the individuals we meet 1 or 2 sentences, and boy, I'm in. Can I join? Put me on your mailing list. What's involved? Because it's the power of the purpose and the fact that we're leading with it. It's not a secret. It's very clear. It's very upfront.
I love it.
Yeah.
Out loud. And Michael, what would you add to that?
Yeah, I like the leading out loud, with purpose out loud. What comes to my mind, Jim, is, I don't usually reflect on my purpose when I'm looking at a spreadsheet or when I'm racing through the day. It's about creating space, I think, both individually to reflect on what we're trying to accomplish, what are we for, but also as a group to just take a pause at these moments and give people time to reimagine and to co-imagine what we're up to together. And the other thing I would just bring into this is the connections and enrolling people in the project, in the work, so in their purpose. So strive to make people change agents, to defining their own future together. Like in this time of uncertainty, how do we enroll people in that conversation so that they give shape and give life to something that we all own together, and that brings up our collective energy and gets us through these times and makes us stronger on the other side.
I love that, Michael, and Ann, of that whole notion of leading out loud with purpose, and also including people in this conversation so we get a greater common understanding of what we mean by purpose. We're not talking about purpose like the leader goes away and then she or he comes back from the mountaintops with some tablets. You can do that, but leaders create followers, and that's not how you create followership. You do it by having everybody's purpose be part of the larger purpose that we all serve. So me coming to do the work that we're doing forwards my own purpose, and it forwards the organization's purpose. And that way people can be independent actors. They're going to be inspired. They'll be self-supervising. How do we get smarter together is really the question.
And when we find that, it's a heck of a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I really like being part of a powerful shared purpose.
Yeah, and you talk frequently about following the joy.
Yeah.
Good. That our job is to create and follow joy and create that. And I think we have a unique opportunity to do that now in the space of a lot of fear.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, we are bouncing up against our time. This has been a great conversation. Thank you.
And fun.
Thank you. Yeah, it's tremendous. Emma Rose, do you want to talk a little bit about the follow-up here for folks?
Yeah, so we'll make the recording available. If you aren't already subscribed to our newsletter, that's where we're sharing right now every week, just as we're having these conversations that we think would be valuable during this time. You can get the recording from this week's conversation in there, and then you'll also see an opportunity and an invitation to sign up for our next conversation, which will be next Thursday. We'll go back to our morning time, so it'll be 8 a.m. Pacific. And that one will be on authenticity. Mickey Connolly and Robin Anselmi will be back for that one. And Liz Cole, who's the CHRO at Marsh, will be joining us as
Wow.
well.
That's great.
So look forward to that conversation. We'd love to have you.
Beautiful. Michael Reuter, as always, my friend, a joy. Kiss your beautiful family, and likewise, and your new horse. Emma Rose, thank you for keeping us moving forward. Appreciate you all. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.